So we got somebody that do know Alberta Cooper, huh? Well, Alberta Cooper, she grew up probably 10 miles down the road from here. And that was Marvin Gaye's mother. They moved to D.C. So Marvin Gaye got roots right here. He didn't live here, but his mother did. She grew up here. But that brings me to the conversation about Marvin Gaye. I think he was talking earlier about coming home. And Marvin Gaye had a younger brother named Frankie. So Frankie was in Vietnam. You know, this was in the 60s. Frankie, then you was drafted. You know, it was you coming out of high school, you drafted, you're going right into service. More like you're going to be drafted into service. So Frankie went to Vietnam, and Marvin Gaye, he dropped out of high school, but he started to singing. You know, he was doing some singing in the church, but then he started doing some singing and met with the likes of who? Stevie Wonder Stevie Wonder was a teenager at the time when Marvin Gaye met him. Michael Jackson was probably like 10 years old, but you know, he met and married Berry Gordy's sister, and Berry Gordy was the owner of of Motown Records, which gave Marvin Gaye his music contract. And he was singing with the likes of Diana Ross, Tammy Terrell, The Temptations, Eddie Kendricks. We can name all the Motown, singers that Marvin Gaye was hanging out with. And Marvin Gaye, I think, like him and Tammy, Terrell had plenty of hits. You know, they had plenty of hits. He was then with Motown was I think they were doing a lot of love songs, duets. And then they formed, The Temptations, Eddie Kendricks, David Ruffin, all them guys. So Marvin Gaye, by getting close to the 70s, with his brother was writing them letters from Vietnam, talking about the killings and the stuff that he was going through over in Vietnam, and he was like, man, that's crazy, that's a lot. And Marvin Gaye was feeling that. So he wanted to do an album. I didn't want to do a song, but then he wanted to do an album based on the stuff he was hearing about Vietnam. And then I think Marvin Gaye went to Berkeley, out in California, Berkeley, and they had the riot that was protested. Dr. King had been assassinated. Malcolm X had been assassinated. The Kennedy brothers. So we're still talking about the 60s, early 70s, all of this going on. And Marvin Gaye was like, I'm tired of doing love songs. I can't do love songs with all of this going on. I mean, it's too much. What's going on, with the killing, the police brutality, there's a whole lot going on. I just can't do love songs anymore. He was getting depressed. His brother came home from Vietnam, and at that point, his brother had been doing heroin. So he had told Marvin Gaye about a lot of the stuff that had been going on in Vietnam. So his brother comes home thinking, okay, I'm back from the military now. I'm going to be looked up to. I know I'm going to have a job waiting for me, this and that. And when he got home, hey, it wasn't none of that. It was still a lot of police brutality and fighting. I think a lot of the college kids then were protesting, and you were seeing the police and them fighting the college students getting beat. So Marvin Gaye was feeling, I guess, the weight of it all. And he went to Berry Gordy. I think around the same time he was singing with Tammy Terrell, and she had a brain tumor and ended up dying at 24 years old. Marvin Gaye had stopped singing for a minute. He wanted to do this, what he called a protest album. So one of the guys with the Four Tops was in the Motown group, had helped Marvin Gaye to write the album, What's Going On. After he wrote it for the Four Tops, but the Four Tops was like, no, man, we ain't doing no protest music. Because then nobody was protesting musically. It hadn't, so they didn't want to do it. So Marvin Gaye said, well, he wanted to do it. He went to Berry Gordy and asked Berry Gordy, look, man, I want to do this protest album. and he laid out the songs, and Barry Gordy was like, man, come on, Marvin, that's too much, man. You trying to do too much. We not doing no protest. We don't do no protest music. He said, no, shut it down. So him and Marvin Gaye going back and forth for a while. Marvin Gaye stopped singing. He was like, I'm not doing another album until I do this, until you let me do this, what's going on. So and Marvin Gaye stood his ground and didn't. Then Barry Gordy came and, I guess they worked it out, and he decided to, let him do the album. So 1970, Marvin Gaye put out the album, What's Going On. Everybody was so, oh man, this ain't gonna work. The album went to the top. What's Going On was all over the place. And it stayed on the top until 1971. That What's Going On, one hit after another. What's Going On, Inner City Blues, Brother, Brother, Make Me Wanna Holler, all this songs, Save the Children. And all this was just Marvin Gaye's interactions with what was going on in the world, what he was seeing, what he was involved in. He was involved in some of the protests that was going on himself. Like I said, the one in Berkeley where he was seeing the police brutality and even kids getting beaten. And he was like, man, we got these kids coming out of high school, they're going straight to war. They're going straight to Vietnam, 17, 18 years old, and then coming out disillusioned by what they're seeing out here in the world. We still don't have that equality. You had the civil rights movement, very active. You had the women's rights movement that was very active. You had the hippie movement going on. So you had the gay rights movement that also was going on. So those four movements that was going on at the same time made everybody's voice louder. Everybody's voice was louder. So when those groups came together and they realized, we are fighting for civil rights, we're fighting for women's rights, we're fighting for all these rights, but what we're really fighting for is human rights. And they realized their voice coming together, it made a big impact and changed, it revolutionized what was going on at the time. We started seeing changes, we saw affirmative action. Women wasn't even voting, black women wasn't voting until 1965. And I understand women wasn't able to get their own credit card until the 70s. And I was like, what? Yeah, it was in the 70s before women could even have their own credit card. That was, to me, it's far-fetched. But the reality is, I'm born in 1960. So I'm seeing even in my lifetime, the type of change, it had to be, if you can't even get your own credit card, you can't, at that point, women were not able to own what, you married, you didn't have equal share in the property that the man had. That was his. But that was the times that, and that's what they was fighting for, those changes. So, like I said, the album did go to the top. Marvin Gaye did get an opportunity to get the album out, and then we started seeing, like now it's not unheard of. Like the Stevie Wonder started doing he did a protest album right after this. And he was, I think when he was in his 20s, what was that, Songs in the Key of Life. He had the Martin Luther King anthem on there for celebrating Martin Luther King's birthday, and the song called Black Man, and he had several other, but everybody had protest songs out after them. The Isley Brothers, the Beatles, everybody started putting that kind of music out. But Marvin Gaye was the first one that was fighting for that, and he had to go up against his own brother-in-law to get that done. So I think, like I said, his brother ended up. He was doing heroin, but he had gotten himself clean, because you remember back then too. See, there wasn't. Now there's rehab centers all around. But see, when these guys, everybody was coming back home from Vietnam, and with disillusion, they were doing. If anybody saw the movie Dead President, remember that movie Dead President, and they came home, but there wasn't no work for them. There wasn't no real opportunity. So that ended up, a lot of those guys were disillusioned to the point of where they weren't making the best choice for themselves. Everybody was getting addicted to drugs. When we think about even with the hippie movement, they had the right cause. They were fighting they wanted to fight for freedom, justice, to be free. Now, I don't know if anybody else is in their 60s or 50s. The hippie movement was, you remember the Volkswagens and Beetle Bugs? Those were the cars that saw the Volkswagen van. Peace signs, flower power. You know, that's what they were about. Was like, we're not, that's how a flea market started. They started going to the flea markets and everything. It was like, we don't want what our parents wanted to give us. They didn't like the way they had got it. So they were anti all of that. But then, of course, they crashed and burned. Started doing LSD, psychedelic drugs, jumping out of windows, jumping out of cars. It got crazy. But that was part of the disillusionment. It was that was a revolutionary fight for justice and peace. And it did change things. But when we look at then, I'm talking about from 1960, 70, and then now, you look at it like, how much has really changed? To me, it looked like, here we go again. Right back where we started from, So, we can appreciate Marvin Gaye, what he done. Marvin Gaye had his own downfall. And said when he made this album in 1970, he was at the height of his career. But he suffered from, depression, drug addiction, and I think he came out later, 79 or 80, had the album Set for Healing. Did good again. He went sky high with that music, and he took a nosedive. Again, he got back on drugs and whatnot, and ended up, him and his parents was clashing. Him and his father, he had moved back in the house that he bought for his parents. Him and his father was clashing. Him and his mother it was an incident where his father ended up killing him. And that's the sad truth. For all that he stood for and did in the 70s, but to have a downfall in the mid 80s like that was, that was heartbreaking. That it ended. I think he died at 44 years old in April. Well, I think his birthday, April the 2nd. He died April the 1st, before his 45th birthday. So sad ending, but we understand the cause and the fight, so we still have to have that same fight today. We still protesting and we still fighting for justice, and that's going to be an ongoing thing. But now it's in our music, it's in everything that we do. It's a part of that. So I appreciate you guys listening. Again, Marvin Gaye's mother was born right here, 10 miles down the road. So he got some history right here. You can reach out and touch him. That spirit is here. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. All right.